Good evening. I'm Craig Smullen, News Director at KOBI-TV NBC5 and KOTI-TV NBC2. I'll be your moderator for this NBC5 News special presentation of Decision 2022, a live Oregon gubernatorial debate. This election is an historic one. We have not two, but three major candidates joining us on this stage tonight, and all of them are women. Southern Oregon's only gubernatorial debate this fall begins right now.
KOBI-TV NBC5, KOTI-TV NBC2, and Southern Oregon University present the Oregon Gubernatorial Debate, live from the studios of KOBI-TV in downtown Medford. Tonight's debate is sponsored by AARP Oregon, the Cow Creek Foundation, the Oregon Association of Realtors, the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, the Oregon Beer and Wine Distributors Association, and Oregon Business and Industry.
Now, let's meet our candidates. Republican candidate Christine Drazen served the Portland area's 39th district in the Oregon House of Representatives from 2019 through 2021. During her tenure, she was the House Minority Leader. Unaffiliated candidate Betsy Johnson first served in the Oregon House from 2001 until 2005. Then she represented Northwest Oregon's 16th district in the Oregon Senate. She held that position until 2021 as a Democrat. Democratic candidate Tina Kotek represented Portland's District 43 and later District 44 in the Oregon House of Representatives from 2008 to 2022. She is the longest-serving House Speaker in Oregon history after first being elected to the position in 2013. Here's our format for tonight's debate. The candidate who receives the initial question will have 60 seconds to respond. The other two candidates will each have 30 seconds to respond to that same question. Both the order the candidates received questions and the order of their 60-second closing statements were determined earlier through a random drawing. Our small studio audience has been asked to hold their applause throughout our debate tonight to be fair to all the candidates. But for now, I'd like to ask them to join me in welcoming our gubernatorial candidates to Southern Oregon. Thank you. We have two panelists joining me in asking questions tonight. To my right, we have Southern Oregon University President Dr. Rick Bailey. And to his right, we have Patsy Smullen, the president of KOBI-TV and KOTI-TV. Senator Johnson, you won the random drawing and will be going first in our debate and in closing statements. Our first question, name a vote you cast in the legislature that you later realized was wrong that you wish you could have had back.
Absolutely. I believe that the corporate activity tax is one that I would have a mulligan on. The problem with that tax was that I don't think it was adequately debated. It certainly did not have the kind of public input that it needed to realize its cumulative effects. It's one of those pieces of legislation that I think is iterative and would profit from having the legislature come back and review the very deleterious effect that it has had on business activity. One of my mistakes was that I trusted Speaker Kotek. That part of the conversation included some genuine PERS reforms. We got too much tax and too little PERS reform. So that's one that I would most assuredly take a second look at. I think in all the conversations that I've had with Oregon businesses, it has had a profoundly chilling effect. And in combination with other non-favorable taxes for business in this state, it is making us a very difficult place to retain businesses or recruit businesses.
Representative Kotek.
Well, I think it's very interesting that Senator Johnson talks about the vote for the corporate activities tax. That money is providing $1 billion more per year for our schools here in Oregon. And to undo that tax would take money out of our schools. And so I think that's a surprising choice there, because I do think those dollars right now are absolutely necessary to make sure our schools have what they need.
Any votes you regret?
You know, I've worked hard every single day. I don't look back, I just look forward.
Representative Drazen.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having us here today. It's good to be back home. I'm originally from this region. It's great to be here today. I am, as the House Republican leader in the state legislature, I had the opportunity to really stand up against single-party control. I had the opportunity to vote in alignment with my district and my community, and certainly on behalf of those people who are not heard across our state. Throughout that process, Some legislation was compromise legislation, and I would say that Senate Bill 762 is one that I would go back on and reconsider. I supported all of the funding for fighting fires and addressing forest land issues, but certainly opposed the implementation that Kate Brown has engaged in when it comes to the wildfire risk maps.
Representative Kotek, it is very likely that whichever one of you is elected will be elected with a plurality and not a majority, perhaps somewhere around 40% of the vote or less. How will you work to convince the majority of Oregonians who voted against you that you were the right person to lead our state?
That's a really great question. I am planning and will be a governor for the entire state. My career in public service in Oregon, from my days at Oregon Food Bank through Children First of Oregon to my 15 years in the legislature, has always been focused on making sure every part of our state can be successful and has what it needs. You're right. Whoever wins this race will not be, have a vast majority of Oregon voters supporting them. So it's going to be up to me as governor to get outside of Salem, be in community with Oregonians across the state, and do a lot of listening. This is about figuring out how local communities who know how to solve their problems can have a stronger partner in the governor, in state government, to make sure we can take on the biggest challenges that are not only facing the metro area, but the entire state: housing, mental health and addiction issues, and the effects of climate change. I believe we can do this together, but it's going to take hard work and dialogue.
Representative Drazen?
Yeah, you really can't trust a word that Tina Kotek says on that issue. Throughout her tenure as Speaker of the House, she went out of her way to crush anyone that didn't agree with her approach to legislating, and certainly would take the Portland approach and impose it across the entire state. And as the only really true voice of balance in this race, I will be a person that will reach across the aisle. Because we will likely have Democrat majorities in the legislature, the opportunity to force negotiations only exists with a Republican as governor.
Senator Johnson.
And I'll take exception to that statement. I think the only way to force bipartisan cooperation is with a governor not beholden to any party agenda or ideology. I have staked out a spot in the middle my entire legislative career, to the point that my own team discharged me from one of the most powerful committees in the legislature because I wouldn't toady the company line. I have a history of working across the aisle. I have colleagues that would attest to that. And an independent governor is the place that we can bring the kind of change that we need to actually have the parties work together.
Representative Drazen, our next question is to begin with you. You are all trying to move from being a legislator to being a governor. Their powers are very different. What power of governor do you think is most important?
I believe that the veto is the most important in our current political climate. We have had single-party control for a decade, which means that we have had the legislature really, truly fail to hold the governor to account. And likewise, we've had the governor fail to hold the legislature to account. We need balance. We need common sense solutions that are durable and with long-term value. And you only get that when you have a true possibility of someone holding the legislature to account. You could add to that the importance of the governor's powers under executive orders as well. And I will be tearing up the governor's executive orders on cap and trade on day one.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you. I agree with Christine on the power of the veto. And as an independent governor, I'm not running for miscongeniality. I would have absolutely no problem vetoing bills. Imagine a governor who would say, I won't sign a bill into law or a budget into law or make an appointment to a board or commission without bipartisan support. I would also look to the unique set of tools in the governor's toolbox that include activating the state police and the National Guard, and would do so to help fight water theft, pollution, and corruption accompanying the proliferation of drugs in Southern Oregon.
Representative Kotek.
Well, I'm not surprised by the responses from my opponents because Senator Johnson's built her career on voting no on pretty much everything, and Representative Drazen literally walked off the job in 2020. I think the most important power of the governor is to convene, to bring people together, to focus people on problems at hand, identify those solutions, and get them done. This isn't about saying no to things. This is about getting people to yes, and that is the power of the governor, to bring people together to solve problems.
Our next series of questions will come from Dr. Rick Bailey.
Great, thanks, Craig. So Senator Johnson, you'll have this one first. Besides family, To whom do you go most often for trusted advice, and why?
Before I answer that question, I'd like to speak to Tina's comment about bringing people together. These two fought like a couple of cats in a sack to the point that Christine had to flee the state and Tina turned the state police loose on her. To now hear this epic amount of stuff about bringing people together, working together, I reject that categorically. That has certainly not been my experience in working with Tina Kotek. Besides family, who do I go
for trusted advice?
For trusted advice, one of my old teachers who has been a very important person in my life and somebody that I can trust to get an honest answer from, even if it means you screwed up, Johnson, and we want you to take a mulligan on this one and think about it again. So that's who.
Great. Representative Kotek.
Yeah, I think one of my strengths is knowing that there are a lot of people in Oregon who have a lot of good ideas and who really love this state. So I think it depends on the topic. If I am working on housing issues, I go talk to the people who are on the street doing the work. If it's an issue around how do we develop our economy, how do we support business, go to our business leaders. I think the strength that I bring to my leadership style is making sure I talk to the people who understand these things and listen and try to figure out what the best path forward is.
Representative Drazen.
Yeah, thank you. You know, as I have traveled the state, I've had the opportunity to hear from Oregonians in every corner of the state. And it has made me incredibly aware of how important it is to go right to the people that are impacted by legislation. And to the greatest extent possible, throughout my service as governor, I commit to put Oregonians first and to listen to them and their needs.
Great. Representative Kotek. The pandemic exposed how vulnerable older Oregonians are, with more than 93% of the deaths being Oregonians 50 and older, and especially vulnerable persons with disabilities, people of color, and people living in long-term care facilities. As governor, are there any changes you would make to protect this population?
Absolutely. We saw early in the pandemic that, as you said, our elder citizens were dying. Communities of color were disproportionately impacted by not having access to the care that they need. That's an indictment of our failure as a state to make sure all Oregonians are helped. When it comes to our older citizens and folks who are particularly living in long-term care facilities, making sure we increase our training, make sure that we make it clearer for those providers about what they need to be providing, and frankly, we need to be paying our caregivers more, providing them with more training so they can be prepared the next time, whether it's a fire in a facility like we had out in Scappoose the other day, in St. Helens, I think, where people actually died, making sure people are prepared whatever comes up. And when it comes to our communities of color, our Black, Indigenous, and communities of color here in Oregon, we have to make sure that those communities have true access to health care, because no one should be left behind when we are in an emergency.
You know, Oregon's population is increasingly an aging population. And as governor, I have committed to ensure that as we move forward, that Oregon is friendly for individuals on a fixed income. I advanced legislation to freeze property taxes for seniors. The cat tax in particular harmed older Oregonians. It forced the shutdown of pharmacies in our most rural communities across our state. We have had policies put in place by Democrat single-party control in particular that has harmed our older Oregonians, and I will do everything to fight for them.
Who could be more sensitive to senior issues than a senior? I am uniquely positioned, I think, to understand some of the burden that our senior Oregonians are facing, whether it's costs at the grocery store or any of the plethora of others. But I want to touch on something Tina just said. She and Kate Brown prioritized teachers with no promise to return to the classroom over our vulnerable senior citizens. And those of us that represented seniors during the onset of COVID had to fight like hell to get vaccines, rare, precious vaccines, for the frail elderly before they were given to teachers with no promise to reopen classrooms.
Are there any changes you would make?
Oh, absolutely. I would consult with seniors regularly. I want to hear from people on the ground. And as best I can tell, Kate has not had the voice of seniors other than the professional lobby in her office advising her on senior issues.
Okay. Representative Drazen, What is an example where you changed your mind about a significant issue based on community input?
Yeah, thank you for this question. You know, as a state representative, it was a privilege to be able to represent my community. I represented kind of rural Clackamas County area in the state legislature, and often heard from my community and would, you know, I had sort of this method where if I had something from my constituents, it went right into my bill files, so I would know right away. And in particular, I ended up voting against a budget that impacted my local fire department because it was inadequate funding for training for them. And I think under other circumstances, I would have supported that budget, but they were very, very clear that it was dramatically inadequate. You know, my community faced the impacts of the 2020 wildfires, and I fought hard for additional funding for our firefighters, and in particular for the community that was impacted throughout the course of that. It's a privilege to do that work, but the job of state representative was always to put my constituents first.
Thank you. I believe that the vociferous business rejection of the corporate activity tax has hardened my position to say that that tax needed to be revisited. I don't think business was adequately consulted. At the time that I voted for it, the business community was split. There were promises, as I've already alluded to, made and not kept about the tax. But it certainly, as I visited with businesses, and they have informed me of the absolutely paralyzing effect that that tax has had on their ability to stay in Oregon and to make money in Oregon. That's been one that I've listened very carefully to business.
I feel like I need to correct the record. Senator Johnson knows that I didn't agree with Governor Brown's decision to vaccinate educators over seniors, so just for the record. But I think community input is always central to the work that I've done as Speaker. I'll give you a particular example. Listening to folks who live in Malheur County on the eastern Oregon border with Idaho, making sure they have a special economic zone so they can deal with some of the issues of being competitive with the communities in Idaho. Listening to the legislators in the communities there, I supported legislation year after year to support those communities on our border because that's what it means to serve the entire state.
Our next series of questions will come from Patsy Smolin.
Senator Johnson, what can you guarantee that you will accomplish as governor in your first year in office?
I can guarantee that we will transform how we do politics in Oregon if we have an independent governor who is willing to veto legislation that doesn't represent all of Oregon. It would be simply transformational to have a governor not beholden to the ideology or the agenda of a political party, to say that I'm loyal only to the citizens of Oregon. It is their input that matters. Again, what I said about signing a budget into law or a bill into law, or especially appointments to boards and commissions that weren't embraced in a bipartisan way, would change the whole dynamic after 40 years of partisan majority, to make sure that every zip code, every geographic region of the state had a place at the table would be transformational. What I can promise you is that if Tina gets elected, Oregon will end up woke, broke, and our forests up in smoke.
In the first year of my administration, there will be fewer people living on the streets. Our neighbors need to get off the streets. We need to help them get there. There will be more transitional shelters. There will be more people working daily, every day, 10 by 10, with individuals who are living on our streets. We will be on a pathway to building more housing across our state because we have a housing and homelessness crisis across our state. And the dollars that are promised to improve addiction and mental health, treatment services in this state, in every corner of our state, will be better, and we will have outcomes to show it.
Yeah, I can promise Oregonians that I will reverse the policies that Kate Brown has adopted and put into place by executive order that have harmed families and have driven up costs. Whether or not that is coming at the gas pump or whether or not it's already happening now as homes are being built today, I will tear up her executive orders that are driving up costs for Oregonians. And to be clear, I will get politics out of the classroom. The governor is the superintendent of public instruction. I am committed to getting parents back in and politics out of our classrooms.
Representative Kotek, many rural Oregon property owners are currently not able to obtain property insurance on their homes. What would you do to ensure that property owners in all of Oregon are able to obtain property insurance in higher risk areas?
Well, this is something that became an issue in my very own district in North Portland because of after Katrina, the Corps of Engineers came in and say we couldn't certify the levees in my district to be able to provide flood insurance for folks who lived along these levees. Across our state, when we are adjusting to changing environments related to wildfires or drought, we have to make sure that we provide assistance for Oregonians wherever they live to be able to be resilient in the face of the changes that are affecting our state because of climate change. And that's one of the reasons I was surprised that Representative Drazen would have voted against Senate Bill 762. That was hundreds of millions of dollars in wildfire prevention and helping our communities be more resilient. And because if we can help our communities make the case that they are being more safe, I think that will help them get the insurance coverage they need.
Here's the tough thing about single party control, is that there might be something about the bill you really, really love and really need for your community. And then it is just chock full of a bunch of stuff that's gonna hurt somebody, that's gonna target someone, that's actually gonna make life hard for someone that doesn't have to be that way. You know, in particular, the wildfire risk maps, I have been clear that I will reverse the wildfire risk maps. That was another example of Kate Brown's overarching, overreaching, abusive approach to her administration, and it's got to end.
I have unique experience with floods. Tillamook floods all the time, and I represented them in the legislature. I helped rebuild the town of Vernonia twice after two 500-year floods in the space of a decade. So I know that well. I warned Jeff Golden when Senate Bill 762 was coming through the legislature that those wildfire maps were not going to work, computer generated. I called for the Department of Forestry to scrap those maps, and the day I called for them to scrap it, they did. And so I have experience in making those towns resilient in Tillamook and in Vernonia.
Representative Drazen, what policies would you propose or support to make the dream of home ownership more attainable for Oregonians?
Yeah, this is such an important question for all Oregonians. With rising home prices right now, we know that the dream of home ownership is becoming less and less attainable for far too many Oregonians. I will protect the mortgage interest deduction, which has in fact come under scrutiny by both Speaker Kotek and our current Secretary of State with a very, very political review of that program. You have to have that program to continue to keep people in their homes. You also need to protect first-time homebuyer programs, and you have to reduce the regulatory burden that's out there. We have got a state that is just creating rule after rule after rule, trying to be all things to all people, and then imposing it on to what the requirements are to build a home. It costs more, it's slower, everything about it impacts Oregonians who want to be homeowners. All of that has got to change.
We have a housing affordability problem because we have a supply problem. We absolutely have to make more land available for residential as well as industrial. We've lost now Intel, the tallest tree in our Silicon Forest, to Ohio, a piece of their portfolio, and we missed the opportunity to have Micron here because we have inadequate supply. I have young people on my staff who bemoan the fact that they will never be able to own a house. We've got to get regulations out of house building. We've got to get the legislature out of telling developers and home builders how to build homes. I agree with Ms. Drazen.
I think the irony of this conversation is both Senator Johnson and Representative Drazen opposed efforts to keep people housed, not only in the Great Recession, when it comes to Senator Johnson, but in the current pandemic recession, trying to keep people from suffering from foreclosure. When I tried to protect people, they fought that. I have a plan on my website that does include specific actions that we need to take to help people buy that home, because when more people own their homes, they build intergenerational wealth, and they provide a community where people are more stable and secure for the future.
Senator Johnson, as governor, how would you approach the state's government-to-government relationship with the tribes as a sovereign people in government? What, if anything, would you do differently from previous administrations?
Be absolutely respectful of the sovereign Indian nations. My father was one of the last non-Indian owners of Warm Springs Forest Products that was located on the Warm Springs Reservation. So I have a long tradition and history going back respectfully with particularly the Warm Springs. I think that Governor Brown, for all of her shortcomings, has established a very good relationship with the sovereign nations, and I would intend to honor and respect those relationships with the tribes.
I believe the nation-to-nation arrangement between the state of Oregon and our 9 federally recognized tribes is a sacred trust that, as governor, making sure I have strong relationships with those communities. I've already started that, started visiting with our recognized tribes in a formal fashion to understand their concerns and their needs, making sure within state government that in my office there's actually a designated person to make sure issues of consultation with the tribe do not fall through the cracks, because I think that's happening right now and we could improve that.
So I absolutely will continue in that same tradition. I agree with my opponents on this issue. It's absolutely essential that we have a respectful working relationship with the tribal governments, and certainly as they have needed help from the legislature and as they need help from the governor's office, to be a partner in supporting them.
Representative Kotek, as governor, what do you see as the state's responsibility to provide adequate health care for all its residents?
I believe that when people are healthy, our communities are healthier. Even before I was in the legislature, at Oregon Food Bank, one of the biggest things that would cause people not being able to buy their own food was medical debt, not having access to health insurance. So I have fought for years to make sure almost every Oregonian, from children to older adults, have access to health insurance. But it's not enough to be insured. Particularly if you live in a rural community, you could have all the insurance in the world, but if you don't have a provider that can provide that care, it's kind of meaningless. So as governor, my focus will be on improving access to the health care that comes along with that insurance, making sure that people can get the mental health and addiction treatment they need. That is health care. Making sure they get the dental care they need, making sure we have the providers in all communities, and optimizing the use of telehealth so people don't have to travel as far to get the care they need. That's what I've done as the Speaker of the House, and I'll continue to do that as your governor.
Yeah, the Speaker's approach to universal health care will swamp out every other budget item in the state. It is a short-sighted approach to our state's budget, and it is absolutely inappropriate and unnecessary. If Oregonians like the government takeover of their health care over the course of COVID, they will love universal health care under Tina Kotek. It is not a good idea. We need to continue to improve access and quality to care without having a state takeover of our health care.
Healthcare needs to be affordable, accessible, and clinically high quality. You have that here in the Rogue Valley. I've toured the new hospital addition that Asante is doing that. I would very much maintain the CCO structure, although it has to be run better than Pat Allen and the Oregon Health Authority are running it. And I completely agree with Ms. Drazen that if you like the way DMV has handled your driver's license renewal, you're going to love the state running health care. We have yet to roll out programs with any efficacy or accountability, and to have the state in the healthcare business would be a disaster.
Representative Drazen, this question is for you to begin with. You have all served in the legislature. As governor, how will you work with the legislature to ensure you are responding to the needs of the state?
Yeah, I look forward to the opportunity to work with the legislature to achieve durable solutions to the challenges facing our state. And my priorities through my roadmap for Oregon have been clear: to focus on homelessness, affordability, community safety, and education. Oregonians need change. And the best way to achieve change is to restore balance in our civic life and to restore accountability. We have for far too long had one party with one agenda advancing what they think that Oregonians should live under. We've got to return local control. We've got to go back to respecting people. We have got to get to the point where government doesn't always know best. We take care of the core functions of government, and we remind Oregonians that they are in charge of their own best future.
I agree with much of what Ms. Drazen has said, but this is going to be an interesting opportunity for a governor to reestablish relationships with the legislature. The composition of the legislature is changing dramatically. Leadership on the Senate side is changing. We'll have a new governor. I would work very diligently to find that middle ground. I've already talked about the fact I'm not running for miscongeniality. I'm running to fix stuff. And I can't imagine that legislators, Republican or Democrat, are happy to go back to their districts with some of the mess that now exists on Oregon streets. I think it would be an easy case to ask R&Ds to work together. They would welcome it, I believe, working with an independent governor.
I think it's important to have a new governor who pays attention to what our state agencies are doing. I'm not interested in being a super legislator. I believe in the balance of power and the different branches. The legislative branch has their role. As the chief executive of the state, making sure I'm recommending good budget investments to make sure the function of the state can be met. And I believe in holding our state agencies accountable and having a customer service, consumer-driven state government that can be more efficient and effective. And that will be my focus.
Senator Johnson, you will get this question first. The Oregon Water Resources Department tells us the southern portion of the state is responsible for approximately 50% of Oregon's water complaints, and the vast majority of them are about illegal marijuana growers. Are there any policy initiatives you would support as governor to ensure our water is going to the right place?
Yes, two things. One is have a well-run agency. I have not been impressed with how Water Resources has provided guidance anywhere around the state on dealing with issues of water, different kinds of mitigation or augmentation. The second thing is, I've already mentioned it once, but I'll mention it again. The governor has unique tools in the governor's toolbox that includes the Oregon State Police and the National Guard. We need enforcement. I think what's happening in Jackson and Josephine County with water theft and the concomitant pollution, the abuse of pesticides, the human trafficking that's going on, just calls out for additional enforcement. And I would certainly not be shy about working with the local sheriff, the local law enforcement, the local DA, and I'm proud to have many of their endorsements, working with those professionals to try to make sure that we are coming after the criminals that are stealing water and giving rise to some of these complaints to Water Resources. I'm proud to be endorsed by 90 working law enforcement people, and I would rely on them for guidance and advice.
As governor, I will work with our federal authorities to crack down on these legal grows that are stealing water, trafficking human beings, and frankly destroying communities with violent activities. The last time I was here in the community, I was sitting down with some farmers talking about their water needs and listening to the concerns of how the limited amount of water was affecting them. The number one goal as governor is to prioritize water and to really understand how we can, as Oregonians, come together to use this limited resource wisely and effectively so people can all have what they need.
Yeah, Southern Oregon is facing a unique challenge down here. I mean, the cartel activity down here has got to stop. And it is going to take an all-hands-on-deck approach to get that done. Engagement, certainly with federal authorities, but enforcement on our side is critical. You know, but I will fire agency heads. Let me be clear about this. Kate Brown's agency heads will not remain. The Oregon Water Resources Department takes years to process a permit. They are a train wreck, and I will change leadership at that agency.
Representative Kotek, Oregon currently ranks 43rd in the country in the percentage of high school students going directly into higher education. What, in your opinion, is the logical connection between that statistic and the state's future economic development?
Well, certainly the goal of our public education system, and I'm a product of public education, is to make sure, first of all, to increase graduation rates. And you'll see in my website, I call for increasing our graduation rates over the next 4 to 5 years so more students are graduating and have a pathway. And it's not all about going to college. We want to make sure that our young people have a pathway to what works best for them. Maybe that's in the trades or starting their own business or getting a 2 or 4 year degree. When we have young Oregonians understanding their potential and finding that right path, we will have the workers we need. We will have the small businesses we need. And that is why I supported $1 billion more per year for our schools in the Student Success Act. An act, by the way, that both my opponents here oppose now. We have to fully fund career and technical education in our schools if we are going to provide that pathway to those living wage jobs and the future that our economy depends on, as well as the lives of our young people.
You know, Oregon has always benefited from in-migration to support workforce needs. And with the state of our state right now, that's coming to an abrupt halt. We need to restore quality of life across our state. When it comes to the tie between kids that are moving on to higher education and what we need in our workforce, we need about 300,000 folks to enter into some version of a certificate or a higher education program to meet the 120,000 additional jobs we know we need in the next decade. To get that done, it's going to take supporting higher ed and meeting students where they are.
We've got to recognize that Kate Brown's policies, supported by Tina Kotek, that shut our kids out of school for 2 years, have had a very deleterious effect. We cannot have a robust economic climate absent a workforce, a trained workforce. So we're going to have to put remedial teachers into our system right now. We've gotten the test scores back that show academically we've cheated our kids. We have not yet calculated the mental, emotional, and social damage that we've done to our kids. The relationship between education and economic development is essential, but we've got some catching up to do.
Representative Drazen, as governor, what specific policy initiatives would you champion to address the growing unhoused population in Southern Oregon?
Yeah, across our entire state, our unhoused populations are a challenge. And down here in particular, Grants Pass has been fighting the fight, but the Ninth Circuit Court has in fact tightened the screws and made it harder and harder and harder for local governments to be responsive to the needs on the street and to act in a way that offers both accountability and compassion. As governor, I will declare a homelessness state of emergency in an effort to marshal state resources and coordinate more fully with local governments. You know, there are programs that are out there currently that are focused on identifying our homeless populations on an individual basis and addressing it more of a case management approach rather than a nameless, faceless 14,000 plus people that are sleeping on our streets every night. We have got to work on this problem in an individual basis. We cannot look at this like there's one answer to all of this. We need to do this in a way that's responsive to the needs of the Oregonians that are currently homeless, and we have got to recognize that this adversely impacts communities and they deserve to have their communities back.
No more plans, no more talking about this problem. We've got to treat it urgently. If a fire had wiped out a town or a flood, we'd be bringing in housing. We'd be finding solutions with accountability and urgency. Unlike my two colleagues, I'm the only one that's actually doing something. I participated in converting an unused abandoned state building into a place of hope, healing, and recovery, the Bybee Lakes Hope Center in Portland. And so for me, this isn't hypothetical or let's plan or let's have another meeting. I've been doing it for the last 5 years.
Well, considering the importance of this issue for all Oregonians, Senator Johnson has one specific example. Leader Drazen has said almost nothing on this topic. More than 3 years ago, I called for a homelessness state of emergency prior to the 2020 session when Representative Drazen left the building and left Republicans to leave and not finish the work. We need to specifically get people connected to services, get more shelters, get more housing. My plan is specific. There are no details coming from my opponents.
Senator Johnson, please explain why you are pro-choice or pro-life. And as governor, are there specific policy changes you would support?
Well, I am absolutely pro-choice. I have been. I was on Planned Parenthood of the Columbia-Willamette before Tina came to Oregon. So I've established my pro-choice bona fides. Oregon would remain pro-choice under Governor Johnson. I believe that it is an essential aspect of women's health care to include a full range of reproductive services.
Are there policy changes you would support?
No.
This issue of reproductive rights is a critical issue for Oregonians across the state right now because of what the Supreme Court did. Planned Parenthood of Oregon has plenty of reasons why they are not supporting Senator Johnson in this race. I am endorsed by Planned Parenthood PAC of Oregon and Pro-Choice Oregon because I am a champion, and I will make sure that we protect access to reproductive health care and abortion in the state. And the one thing I would do differently is to make sure we protect providers in the state from states who are trying to criminalize the work that they need to do to provide health care. And that is an extra thing we need to do here in our state.
You know, I first of all take exception to both of my opponents in the last answer. I engaged actively in support of youth homelessness in a program called Second Home that got people into housing so that they could finish their undergraduate. To finish their high school degree. But here's the other thing about this. Tina Kotek's approach to housing has been entirely housing first. That is not a response. That's not an approach to homelessness. That is a failed policy that's been underway for far too long. When it comes to the question of life, I have never shied away from my pro-life values. My opponents in this race have made the decision to scare the heebie-jeebies out of Oregon or out of Oregonians as if this issue is at stake in Oregon. It's not. Pro-choice values are embedded into our statutes right now because Tina Kotek did that. She can't both take credit and tell everybody that it's at risk. It is not at risk. Everything about access is already in Oregon law.
Representative Kotek, what strategies would you have as governor to attract new businesses to Oregon and to keep companies from leaving our state?
Yeah, and I think we should focus on the businesses who are here first because we need to grow the businesses who are committed to Oregon to stay here and grow. One of the ways as governor that I would promote that is make government permitting and regulations easier to work with, more efficient and effective. Make sure we have workforce housing. Employers have no place for their employees to live. And we need to make childcare more affordable for communities around the state so people can go back to the office. And in terms of what a governor can do, being a chief promoter, traveling to other countries, talking about buy our products, make more things here so we can sell things to other countries. There are lots of things that as a governor to be promoting very specific growth in certain industries. And I support the work of the Semiconductor Task Force to try to make sure we can be a place where we can grow our semiconductor industry. But at the end of the day, we also have to support our small businesses who frankly need more help than the big guys do.
Representative.
I'm sorry, you were looking at her,
sorry.
she was looking at me.
So Representative Drazen, it's your turn.
Thank you.
Apologies to all.
Thank you. It is laughable to imagine that Speaker Kotek would do anything that was pro-business at all. In her time as Speaker of the House, she has raised taxes, she has raised regulations, she has done everything to attack business and frankly to make it harder and harder and harder to do business here in the state of Oregon. Oregon is one of the least business-friendly states in the nation, due in large part to the leadership of Tina Kotek.
I would pick up the phone. I would find out what the customer needs. We were told by the manager of Intel that they left because nobody in the governor's office answered the phone to hear their plea for additional industrial land. We lost Micron because we didn't have available industrial land. So it's find out what the customer needs, expand industrial land, make agencies nimble and neutral. There are too many instances where agencies are participants in the debate about to cite or not to cite. They should be the referee, not the participant. When you've got pictures of people issuing permits, protesting an application, that's wrong, and that would change with me.
Representative Drazen, Senators Wyden and Merkley do a town hall in every county of Oregon every year. How will you be present in rural communities here in Southern Oregon to make sure our voices are heard? Will you do the same as they have?
Yeah, I would look forward to traveling our state throughout my service as Oregon's governor. You know, I am a small town girl. I was born in Klamath Falls. I graduated high school at Eagle Point High School. Go Eagles. And this is where my parents lived until my mom passed away. I am from the rural parts of our state. And they hold a special place in my heart because what I know about the rural parts of our state is that Oregonians that don't live in the urban core, in the urban center, they really have to work together. They really understand community. They really understand their own needs and their own challenges. As governor, I will ensure that we have local control, that I support policies that allow for a thriving state in every corner of our state, and I would look forward to serving as governor for all of Oregon.
Will you do the same as Senators Wyden and Merkley?
I would love to.
Absolutely, I would come. But I would not just come and listen or come and promise broadband expansion. I would go back to Salem and be a tiger, a fighter for what the local people needed. Too often, especially coincidental with elections, people blow into town, they hold town halls, they listen, and then they go back to Salem, they close the door, and they screw rural Oregon out of sight, out of mind. I would be there as a champion for the ideas that come up organically in local places that need funding and support from the state. I would have your back.
Well, I can't wait to get on the road. I've been doing it now in the campaign and did it as speaker as well, visiting my colleagues in their home districts across the state. And it's not just about the town halls. It is about being in community and listening. You know, hanging out at the local cafe, going to the hairdressers, going to the salon and hanging out, talking and listening to people about what's going on in their lives. I can't wait to do that as your governor and spend a lot less time in Salem. The folks in the legislature will be fine without me for a little bit.
Senator Johnson, political analyst Jim Moore wrote recently, quote, "You three clearly don't like each other. As governor, you're going to have to work with people you don't like. How are you going to do that?"
I've worked with people I don't like for the last 20 years. And you just check that at the door and figure out what keeps Oregon moving forward. What's good for Oregon? It's an acquired skill. It's bringing people to work on projects where there's controversy. Rebuilding the Vernonia schools had controversy, and I helped negotiate that. Trying to eradicate habituated elk in Gerhardt has been a monumental fight, and I've been in the vanguard of negotiating solutions there. OMIC, the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center, that put business, philanthropy, academia, and government together. I help negotiate those very durable relationships that are bringing R&D from our universities to make different techniques and procedures lighter, greener, more ecologically friendly. So I have a track record of working across the aisle in bipartisan ways, including with people that I genuinely don't like.
I think it's really important to be comfortable with a little bit of conflict, because if we're going to solve problems together, we're not always going to agree, but if we all hear each other, authentically engage, and speak with each other with respect, we're going to come up with some really good solutions. I was Speaker of the Oregon House for 9 years, the longest serving Speaker in Oregon history. You have to be able to work with everyone to be serving that long. And I have negotiated legislation after legislation to help the entire state, and I will continue to do that as governor when needed.
You know, as the House Republican leader, it was my day job to work across the aisle. And sometimes I had to do the hard thing. And I had to do the unpopular thing because I was standing up for people that are otherwise unheard and just frankly run over. But throughout it all, I have a deep and abiding respect for people, regardless of where they live, regardless of who they are. And that is my guiding principle in public service, as a Republican leader, and frankly, as the next governor of the state of Oregon.
Representative Kotek, is there anything you would change regarding Oregon's current gun legislation?
Well, I think the top priority for a governor is to keep our communities safe. And we have an epidemic of gun violence right now. And one of the things we need to do is continue to encourage common sense gun legislation that will keep our communities safe. Senator Johnson has opposed common sense gun legislation her entire career. She voted against background checks and red flag laws to help keep people safe. She voted against safe storage laws. Both Representative Drazen and Senator Johnson voted against keeping guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. And just last week, in an interview with the Bend Bulletin, Representative Drazen said she would administratively change the red flag law that is in law right now. The red flag law says if someone is in danger of hurting themselves or others with a firearm, you can temporarily remove that firearm, temporarily. She wants to change that. That law is keeping people safe today. And I'm not beholden to the NRA. I will stand up to the gun lobby to keep our communities safe.
I have yet to see a single piece of legislation that is perfect as enacted. And the red flag law is no exception. I believe that the red flag law does good, could do good across our state. But it was not handed down from heaven. It is not perfect, and it does need review, just like any other piece of legislation. I am a strong supporter of our Second Amendment rights. I believe it's the role of government to preserve and protect your freedoms. And in fact, what we need to do to address violence is to have more law enforcement on our streets.
Tina wants to take everybody's guns. Christine doesn't want to do anything. That to me is not acceptable. We must do something to keep guns out of the hands of criminals, crazy people, and kids. To that end, I would raise the age to purchase certain weapons from 18 to 21. I would augment background checks, including allowing schools to provide information that would go into a background check file, give them immunity. I would put mental health professionals and school nurses into the schools to help troubled kids that were coming off the rail and identify them early.
Representative Drazen, Portland crime, our internationally known gem, has people now nervous to visit. What will you do?
Yeah, we have got to increase the number of law enforcement officers throughout our state. My opponents oversaw budgets throughout a period where law enforcement state troopers were dramatically underfunded based on our population for our state. We're at 8 troopers per 100,000 people in our state, and when they were fully funded, that number was more than triple that. It is time to recognize that we won't have safe communities unless we have the presence of law enforcement officers there. We cannot stretch law enforcement thin. It is less safe for them, and it is certainly less safe for our community. The answer for Portland is to work with Portland and support Portland, and as they need help, to continue to provide support so that those are safe communities. We have got to have more law enforcement on our streets.
I reject the notion that we underfunded OSP. I oversaw that budget, and we put more money into Oregon State Patrol than has ever happened. I find it interesting from these two ladies that they tied the hands of police in dealing with rioters. We have got to get the streets cleaned up and make them safe. We've got to empower the police to go in and fix things. We've got to get the tents off the streets. We need law enforcement to bring down the level of violence and crime in Portland, or our international reputation will continue to diminish.
I think it's amazing that Senator Johnson has found religion on gun violence prevention, because that has not been the case, and I don't believe we can trust what she just said. In all of our communities, we have to make sure law enforcement has what they need to get drugs off the streets from the drug cartels, the meth and the fentanyl that is driving violent behavior in our communities. I want to make sure that as governor, I work with the U.S. Attorney's Office to fight those drug cartels. We need to make sure law enforcement has what it needs. We also have to make sure that there are trained mental health crisis counselors, so when someone's in a mental health crisis, that's who's showing up to help them.
Senator Johnson, when did you first start thinking about running for governor, and why?
I want to speak to one other thing about the streets of Portland. I would absolutely stop Kate Brown's policy of releasing dangerous felons, robbers, muggers, rapers out of prison. Tina stood by silently while that happened, but our streets are violent enough without 1,000 people let out of the penitentiary. The other thing is that I find it a little disingenuous that when she wrote a letter siding with rioters over the police, that we're now talking about helping our law enforcement. I'm sorry, I was so angry about that.
When did you first start thinking about running for governor?
People have asked me to run for governor for a long time, and my historic answer had been I'd rather throw myself in a wood chipper. I think finally we have gotten to the point in Oregon where enough people are just pissed off. They've seen their property values decline, their streets are violent, tent cities are everywhere, our education system is failing our kids. And I believe in rural and urban Oregon that that divide has been united by a genuine suspicion of Salem and government's ability to be on the side of ordinary Oregonians.
Excuse me, what's the question?
Let me find it. When did you first start thinking about running for governor, and why?
My wife and I had a conversation last August about this decision because we're both angry that things are not working in this state. I've worked hard as a legislative leader to help improve our state, to help Oregonians, and we need to follow through on those promises. We need a state government that functions. We need to take on our mental health and addiction crisis. We need to get our neighbors off the streets. And I'm the only one on this stage that has the proven track record to do comprehensive, significant work. And as your governor, I look forward to having different tools to help improve our state and work on those very key problems.
Lord have mercy. The last thing Oregon needs is for Tina Kotek to have different tools. We need change. We don't need a third term of Kate Brown. We don't need to continue on the same course. We don't need more of the same. We don't need to double down on the failed policies that haven't worked. The decision to run for governor was a weighty one. When I made the decision to get into public life in the first place, it was a decision that was dependent on the idea that I could be effective on behalf of my community. You know, single party control, one voice at the table, everywhere you turn, everywhere you go, isn't the opportunity to be effective. But serving as Oregon's next governor is an opportunity to fight for Oregon and to improve quality of life for all Oregonians.
Dr. Bailey will now ask our last question.
Okay, Representative Kotek, as a legislator, what have your constituents liked best and least about you?
Well, I served in North and Northeast Portland for 15 years. It was quite an honor to have that role. For those of you who don't know that part of the state, it's very diverse, lots of great neighborhoods, commercial sites. It's the home of the University of Portland and Portland Airport. So it's a very diverse neighborhood and district. I think what my constituents have liked the best is I represented their values. When they said, we need to raise the minimum wage, I went on and did that. When they said to me, we have to make sure people have access to paid sick leave, I worked on that. When they said, we need different options to stay in our homes because we are faced with rent gouging, 50, 75% increases in rent, I passed a bill to protect tenants from rent gouging. I took on the big things on behalf of my constituents and behalf of the entire state. I think if there was anything, it's like, the problem when you're Speaker of the House is you don't get to spend enough time hanging out in the neighborhood because you have extra responsibilities. And as governor, my job is to make sure I stay out of Salem and be out in the community with our Oregon neighbors.
You know, I was a fighter on behalf of my community, and I too represented the values of my community. That was my role. I took it very seriously. It was a trust that they had given me, and I fulfilled that trust. I would say that the thing that was most concerning to them was when I made the decision not to run again for my House seat. They know how much I love our community and how much I love our region, and it was a big decision to stop serving them in that way.
For 20 years, every time the phone rang in our office, I was there. I answered it a lot myself. I think my constituents would say I was on their side. We never asked, are you a Republican, are you a Democrat? If you were in Senate District 16 and you had a problem, we were there to help fix it. We've gotten people insulin. We've saved houses. One of my most prized possessions is a Christmas card that I got from a little girl who said, we have our house for Christmas because you saved it. So I think my constituents would tell you I've been there for them. I attend regularly. I drove 80,000 miles when I was representing Senate District 16. I was there, and I was their champion.
Well, that concludes the debate portion of our program. It's time now for our closing statements. Senator Johnson, you are first. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you. Oregon is a mess right now. And how do we see it manifested? We see it in failed schools, tent cities, drugs, violence, and crime. I still believe that there's time to fix it, and I think the path to fix it is with an independent governor, a governor who is not bound to the ideology or the agenda of partisans, a governor who has the experience, the knowledge of the state budget, the knowledge of the entirety of our state. I would do as governor the same thing that I have done as a state legislator. I would be on the side of Oregonians, be passionate about and present in the job, work my tail off to make sure that all Oregonians felt as though they were represented. Again, having Medford's voice at the table prior to an appointment to ODF&W, having Medford's voice at the Department of Forestry before we set big swaths of land out of bounds for sustainable timber harvest. I am passionate about doing this job, so I'm asking you to take a chance on Oregon, not on me. Take a chance on Oregon, elect an independent governor.
60 seconds, Representative.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for tonight's debate. It's great to be back in Southern Oregon. We all know the state is facing challenges. We don't need polls or any of us to really tell us that. We're all feeling it. We know it's happening. Up here tonight, you have three very different perspectives on how to govern our state in the next 4 years. Senator Johnson and Representative Drazen want to take us in a new direction, but what they're really offering is a right-wing version of Oregon. Senator Johnson, for more than 20 years, has sided with Republicans in a way that has hurt working families. She didn't support increasing the minimum wage. She didn't support getting paid sick leave for workers. She even voted against background checks for gun sales. Representative Drazen wants to ban abortion. She's supported by extreme groups who want to ban abortion. In fact, last week in her conversation with the Bend Bulletin said, I look forward to having that conversation to have restriction on abortion in our state. They are out of step with Oregonians. I have fought in my entire public service career for the values of Oregonians and for working families, and I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
As I have traveled this state, it has been a privilege to talk to Oregonians in every corner of the state. They have shared with me their hopes and their dreams, their fears, and their frustrations. And many of them have told me, this is it. We get this done now, or we're done. We're gonna move, we're gonna leave, we're gonna shut up the business. We can't do this anymore. And the reason they feel that way is because of the two people on the stage with me today. No matter what they say, no matter how they presented themselves, they are the status quo. They had their hand on the wheel and drove our state into a ditch. So I have one question for Oregonians. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And if the answer is no, then join me. We need change. We don't need more of the same. And frankly, the future of our state has the opportunity to have a prosperous future where all of us can work together to achieve our best and brightest dreams. I am asking for your vote. Thank you.
I'm amazed at how quickly you all got through this. Congratulations. 60, 30, 30 is not easy for a debate, so thank you for doing that. I encourage all our viewers to watch all the debates to get a full picture of where the candidates stand on each and every one of these issues and the many more we were not able to cover tonight. You can watch this debate or find links to other gubernatorial debates on our website, KOBI5.com. Just click elections. I want to thank you, our viewers, for watching, and again, our candidates for attending. Good night.
Good night.
You have been watching the Oregon Gubernatorial Debate, presented by KOBI-TV NBC5, KOTI-TV NBC2, and Southern Oregon University. Tonight's debate was also brought to you by AARP Oregon, the Cow Creek Foundation, the Oregon Association of Realtors, the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, the Oregon Beer and Wine Distributors Association, and Oregon Business and Industry.